I've been a professional game designer for 18 years now, and the question I get asked the most is,
if you design Fruit Ninja, why aren't you rich?
But the second most asked question I get is, how do you become a game designer? A lot of people don't actually know what a game designer does, and I relate to that. I did not know what a game designer was until midway through my interview to become a designer at Half Brick Studios. So how did this happen? Well, I went to university back in the before times for a game development degree, but you can see I'm using like heavy air quotes here. It was really just two other degrees like sticky taped together, a Bachelor of Information Technology and a Bachelor of Comm Design. Not really a game development specific degree. That wasn't really a thing back then. As an example, we were given an assignment where we had to make an interactive world building experience. Pretty much everyone else made a pick a path story website thing. Instead, I spent like 100 hours building a Counter-Strike level, for which I was given a failing grade. And I contested it on the grounds of this is supposed to be a video game degree, but whatever. You can tell that I'm totally chill about that now. But like I said, my course was basically a programming degree and an art degree stuck together. And mostly I learned I'm bad at both of those things. And at no point did anyone sit us down and explain the role of a game designer, or an artist, or a programmer, or a producer, or a tester, or really any of the roles in the industry. So enough of like backstory. What is a game designer? I'm gonna give the analogy that I often use when I'm explaining game job roles to people who have absolutely zero idea how the games industry work or how games get made. And so what I like to say is that a games designer is like the town planner for making a town. Their job is to figure out what the town needs, how it should be structured, and consider all the different needs for different people who will live in the town, so that as many people as possible will enjoy it. That's kind of what a designer does when they're making a game or a feature. Meanwhile, you have the engineers and the builders, and they're the ones that actually build the things in the town. They create the roads and the buildings and the bridges. They have their own planning to do, but it's more technical. Like, how do I build this bridge on this kind of soil so it doesn't collapse? So these are the programmers. And then finally, you have the architects. The architects are going to make everything look great. They're going to make sure everything fits together nicely. They're going to make that bridge look amazing. And these are the artists. Now, I've probably butchered what town planners and engineers and architects actually are, but I hope that this starts to build an understanding of what these roles are like. When I describe this kind of town planner role, and also when people describe designer roles, I think it often makes it sound like the town planner / designer is the boss, the one in charge. And sometimes that is the case. But I think it's important to remember that it doesn't just flow in one direction. Because if the engineers think that it's going to be too hard to build a bridge where the town planner wants it, then maybe the town planner will have to go back and revisit their plan and tweak it with this new information. So there is a push and pull between all of the disciplines, and everyone works together to try and make everyone in the town as happy as possible. Okay, enough analogies. Let's show a really simple example of what a designer might have to do. Let's say you have this game called Slide the Shakes, and the way it works is really simple. Think of it like 1D putt-putt. You can only set the power, and you have to make the shake slide along the bar and finish in the goal area. Now, there are already hundreds of levels, but we need some new levels, and they need to be like more interesting and more exciting, more variety than just different shapes and themes. So your job as a designer is to come up with some ideas of what kind of new thing we might add to the game so that we can get heaps of new levels without it being too hard to actually make. So you start thinking up and sketching up ideas, and the first idea you have is maybe we could have 3D levels, like they'd be super visually amazing, but that would be a lot of work to make, so maybe not that. What's something easier? Maybe we could have a different kind of surface, like we already have ice and sticky. Maybe we could do a surface that if you stop on it, you lose a life. I mean, this would be really easy to make, but it's kind of a bit hard to communicate. And then you think, what if we had teleporters kind of like in Portal? That would be really easy, and there'd be a whole new way that we could reuse existing levels. So you start sketching ideas, and now you have a new decision to make, which is, do the teleporters have direction. Like, what do we do with the milkshake's speed and direction when it enters? And pretty quickly you realize that if the portals have a specific exit direction, there's way more levels you can make. So you give this spec to the programmer and artist, and they go away and they actually make the thing, and now you can start making levels. And because you'd already planned it out, you're able to make all kinds of fun and interesting levels that are completely new to the game without it being that much work for you or the programmer or the artist. This is the value of that planning, really thinking through and understanding the problem space and what an interesting and creative and efficient solution might look like. And again, this is a gross simplification because in reality, teams will have more than just a designer, a programmer, an artist a lot of the time. You might have different specialist roles, like you might have a designer that is just working on the menus or just working on the metagame or just working on the balance. And the designer's role is to understand the problems, come up with solutions, and generally plan within that space. Okay, so let's pull up that title card again because the wording of it is very specific. It does not say play games a lot. It says play lots of games. Because playing 1,000 hours of Minecraft is not going to help you be a better game designer compared to, say, playing 1,000 different games for an hour each. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go deep on some games. Obviously, there's lessons to be had there. But by exposing yourself to as many different games as possible, you will see all kinds of different mechanics, different structures, different themes, different ideas. You might see something in an interactive fiction game that turns out could work great in your shooter. And so you build up this kind of internal library of knowledge. And it can be really handy as well to have a shorthand when talking to other game developers. Like if I say, okay, so I'm making this roguelike and it's a bit like Dome Keeper in terms of the towing items to the shop and the upgrade loop, but instead of having any mining elements, it's underwater and has a bit of a Subnautica horror kind of vibe. If you've played those games, you might already be able to imagine what I'm talking about, and you might have new questions. You're like, oh wait, so is it 3D like Subnautica or 2D like Dome Keeper? It's like a shortcut. Feed the Deep, which was my first solo game, is the game I was talking about. So I would be interested to know if, based on my description, the game I'm showing now is kind of what you had in mind. Now, obviously, you don't want to be just smashing together different games. You want to have original and novel ideas too, but having the huge library of ideas from other games helps fuel that creativity. Now, the important thing is when you're playing all of these games, don't just play them mindlessly either. Instead, you should be looking at them and thinking, what worked here? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? Did it not just work for me? Was it maybe great for some other different kind of player? What were the designers trying to achieve with this? If I was in charge of this game, what is the one thing I would change about it? Really examine the game and think critically about it, because you're playing not just as a player, but as a designer. Now you might think, where am I going to get 10,000 games? I can't afford that. Well, if you head to itch.io, turn on the free tag, boom, there's 1 million games to get you started. And to be sure, a bunch of those games are going to be bad, but it is worth playing bad games too, because even if the game is bad, there might be good ideas in there. And you can learn from bad games, like why is it bad? What didn't work? And also, you are going to stumble across some real gems in there as well. When I was making this video, I came across Dragon Sweeper. Whew, that is a truly beautiful little game with a really smart and clever and tight design. Heavily recommended. You should check it out. Even if normally like a puzzle strategy game is not your thing, there are things to learn here. So I touched on this above, but you might think that you want to be a designer because you love playing games. And of course, there's a lot of crossover there. But playing games and designing games are not the same thing. The best way I can think to sum this up is using an example from when I was a kid. I grew up on a farm, I loved animals, and so I wanted to be a vet. When I turned 16, I went and did a week of work experience at the local veterinary hospital, and let me tell you, loving being around animals and being a vet, those are not the same things. There's obviously overlap there. I doubt many vets get into the business without loving animals first, but holy cow, I found out pretty fast that being a vet was not for me. It turns out that patting a dog, and doing surgery on a dog, two very different things. Now, playing games and designing games is maybe not as different as that, but it still is different. I don't actually play games very much anymore. I try and check things out when they come out for exactly the reasons I said before, and every now and then something gets really under my skin and I really enjoy it. But I do, however, love the process of design. I think I would probably be almost as happy being an industrial designer, designing furniture or appliances. Now, I design games because I grew up playing games, and I do love games, but design is my true love. Now, for sure, if you don't play games, you're not going to be a game designer. You need that library of internal knowledge. You need to care about what you're making. But once again, just if you're deciding to be a designer, make sure you care about design. If you have an amazing idea, then unfortunately that does not mean much unless you can get it out of your brain and into somebody else's brain. So having excellent communication skills is super important for a designer. But not only that, you need to be able to sell your idea. You need to get people excited about your idea. And part of other people being excited about the idea will have something to do with the idea itself, but it also comes down to communicating it clearly and giving reasons why it's a good idea and how it's going to work. If you just go, this is what we're going to do, and I don't care what you think, well, the person you're telling that to is probably not going to be that jazzed to work on that idea with you, and maybe they're not going to do that great a job. They need to be on side, and so having that clear communication really helps. And maybe you're thinking, well, I'm going to be a solo developer. I don't need to tell my ideas to anybody else. Guess what? If you're a solo developer, you still have to market your game and then get people to buy it. And guess what? That's communication as well. Work on your communication skills. It will pay off in so many different ways for the rest of your life. Now, as a disclaimer, this all comes from the perspective as a neurotypical designer with a neurotypical team. Everyone has different styles of working and communicating. There's no one correct way to do this. I'm just giving general advice that I think broadly fits many situations. Okay, so now this is the absolute main point that I really want to drive home. The rest has been the appetizer. Make lots of stuff. Make lots of stuff. There is a great parable that I think sums up how you should think about making games, especially at the start of your journey. It comes from a book called Art and Fear, and it goes like this. A ceramics teacher announced on opening day that the class was being split into two groups. Everyone on the left is going to be graded by the quantity of work they produce. Like literally everything they're going to make is just going to be thrown on a bathroom scale and weighed. And then they get their mark. The more, the better. Now, everyone on the right is going to be graded on the quality of their work. They only need to make one single pot, but it has to be perfect. When it came to grading, the interesting thing was the works of the highest quality came from the quantity group. They'd been just busily churning out work and learning from their mistakes, whereas the quality group had sat around theorizing about what makes a perfect pot and had nothing to show for it other than some theories and some not very good work. Make lots of things. Quantity leads to quality. Game jams are a great way to do this and get involved. If you think that big, ambitious projects are going to be what impresses employers, I really don't think that's the case in my experience. When I was doing lots of hiring, I just wanted to see something good, something interesting. It didn't matter if it lasted 2 minutes or 1,000 hours, and it was almost always the people who had a whole heap of game jam games who were better designers than the ones who had a 15-person team working on something for like a year. Because look, at the end of the day, here's the thing. Your first few games are gonna suck. They just are. Mine did. Everyone's do. So get them out of the way as fast as you can. Make more things and learn, and make that feedback loop of making something, putting it out there and learning as short as possible. Learn as quickly as you can. Don't start with, I'm gonna make the MMO of my dreams. And here's, I think, a really important point. There are no excuses. No excuses. You can't code? Find a team. You can't find a team? Make something that you can make. Make something out of paper. Make a mod. Make a level. Make up new rules for a game that you and your friends already play. Make up a game that you can play on a chessboard. Make up a game you can play with 1 dice, with 10 dice, with 1,000 dice. It's all design, and there are lessons in all of them. The first design I ever did was when I was 16 or so, and I started making levels for Worms Armageddon Roper Races online. All you needed was Microsoft Paint. And yet there were so many good level design lessons to be had. I would make these levels and upload them to the servers, and people would complain about the things that were bad about them and tell me the things they liked about them. And so I would go and fix them and improve them and make new ones and then upload those. I learnt so much through that process, and I was literally just using Microsoft Paint. I've also done paper prototypes before that were just like a whiteboard and a pen. We actually pitched this to a publisher. It's super useful and it's hella fun to make. And then the other thing is, after you have made the thing, get people to play the thing. The more, the better. Do not be like, it's not ready to show people, or I'll show you a little bit later on. Just show people all the time. And to be clear, this will be painful. People will not understand what's going on. They won't know how to jump. They will not find your work fun. And this is all part of the process. This is good. These are the lessons. It's not going to be just look at all this cool stuff I made, aren't I awesome? But you will improve and you will learn how to be a better designer. But to be clear, this will never go away. Most prototypes I make suck. I learn what doesn't suck by showing people. And I really think the more things you make and the more people you show it to, the more success you're going to have as a designer. Now, you might have gotten through this whole video and been like, okay, cool, I've done all that, but how do I get a job now? And to that, I say, I don't really know. I mean, I kind of do. I've hired dozens of people over the past 12 years, but really I'm just one person with one perspective. And I've always looked for a particular kind of designer. I've always hired for generalists, not specialists. So I don't think my thoughts here are very generally applicable. And it's also just one perspective. I think going into that side of things is a whole can of worms and would need its own video, and I would need to bring in more perspectives. That's kind of the case with this video as well. I'm just giving my perspective and what has worked for me. Different people find different things work for them. You'll have noticed I haven't recommended a single game design book or course. I've only ever read one game design book in my whole life, but other people get tremendous value from reading about specific game design theories and patterns. I actually have more books about the design of teapots and city layouts and graphs than I do about games, because I find that interesting. Anyway, I hope this was maybe helpful. I would love to hear other people's perspectives in the comments. What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? Is there anything you think I missed or anything that surprised you? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in a few months for my next big video that's really been a lot of work. Thanks.